This is border country. The beautiful Scottish borders with its dramatic countryside, rolling hills and fertile fields, supporting prime livestock and the finest crops. Home for centuries to fiercely proud and independent people whose settlements, roundhouses and peel towers are scattered across the landscape. Here, nearly 2,000 years ago, the mighty Roman army constructed a frontier post at the limit of their vast empire. The massive fort near the village of Newstead stood in native Iron Age homelands in the shadow of the three hills, the Eildons to us, but known to the Romans as Trimontium. When the Romans finally left, it's difficult to discern the patterns of border history, but we do know that Christianity was established amongst the border communities. St. Cuthbert was abbot here at Old Melrose, prior to his move to the island of Lindisfarne. Melrose parish with its Cistercian abbey was the first in Scotland. It was later besieged during the Reformation in the time of Henry VIII, and finally attacked and bombarded by the forces of Oliver Cromwell during the English Civil War. And in this beautiful landscape, the border reivers carved out their dubious living, defined by cross-border raids and cattle rustling. Borders bring conflicts of many kinds. The area around Melrose is replete with romance, history, conflict and culture. Major battles such as Flodden and Philiphaugh impacted on the town, inspiring ballads and stories, including the poems and novels of Sir Walter Scott. Abbotsford House, his fairy tale self-made ancestral home, his legacy and his nemesis, is located just beyond Melrose on the banks of the Tweed. Today the skirmishes of history have been replaced by sporting rivalries, with contests of a different kind enacted at the Greenyards rugby field in Melrose. Here, Melrosians at the home of the Sevens do battle with other teams from around the borders as well as national squads from further afield. The border towns and boroughs have proud industrial traditions too. The textile industry in particular is of world renown, with cashmere and tweeds of the highest quality being sold around the world. But perhaps the borders are best known for their annual festivals and rideouts, as individual towns celebrate their identities and traditions. History and heritage are commemorated by ceremonial events led by the young men and women of each town, as they mark the boundaries of their towns in spectacular fashion, mounted on horseback and carrying the colours of their communities. Melrose celebrates a rich and fascinating past in a plethora of events and activities throughout the year, from historic literature typified by the border minstrelsy of Sir Walter Scott, to contemporary writing showcased annually at the Borders Book Festival. Walking paths trace our history and reflect the spiritual influence of St. Cuthbert, follow the scenic rivers and valleys and take us to the wonderful archaeological sites where our ancestors once teased their living from the land. Melrose and its environs delights and inspires everyone who experiences them. Here is a place defined and shaped by centuries of strife, imagination and endeavour, alloyed in a melting pot of conflict, culture, faith, creativity and innovation. Our present reflects our past and moves forward. In Melrose, our story begins with the Iron Age community, meeting with the Romans. Here treads a Roman sandal, there a burnished shield glints in Placid Loch's memorial mirror. Trimontium is one of the most important Roman fortified sites in Britain. In 1911, local lawyer and amateur archaeologist James Curl published a remarkable report of his findings and discoveries unearthed at the fort at the foot of the Eildons. The ancient Roman geographer and mapmaker Ptolemy even names it on the first map of Britain. The Trimontium of the Romans, the place of the three hills, was a cavalry rather than a legionary fort, Curle's exploration revealed a fort that had been occupied several times during the Roman occupation. Concealed on their departure were wonderful objects of profound historical significance, such as the fabulous cavalry parade helmets, two with their sinister face masks, beautifully decorated bronze wine flagons, bronze saddle fittings, studded leather chamfrons, coins, tools, and a vast array of pottery. Over 4,000 objects were found, mostly in excellent condition, including military equipment such as spearheads, ballista bolts, cavalry trappings, and the everyday tools of the soldiers, including their dolabras, cooking utensils, and agricultural implements. Human and animal remains add to the assemblage, along with the writing materials and the trivia of everyday life. Most of the finds are part of the permanent collection at the National Museum of Scotland and Scottish Borders Council, managed by Live Borders. The fort was home to many women and children as well as military personnel, and the inhabitants came from all levels of society and from all over the empire. One of the cavalry units based in the fort were the Ala Augustae Vacontiorum, an elite unit raised from among the Vaconti tribe of southern Gaul. Others came from Syria. Occupied intermittently between 80 and 211 AD, the fort initially acted as a forward post in the quest to conquer the land the Romans knew as Caledonia. With the construction of Hadrian's Wall in the early 120s, it became an outpost beyond the frontier, and when the Antonine Wall was built between the Forth and the Clyde in 142, Trimontium acted as a supply base to the frontier to the north. It remained an important site until the Romans withdrew permanently to the south of Hadrian's Wall in the 3rd century. At the height of its occupation, the fort housed approximately 1,500 military personnel and an equal number of civilians, including wives, children, traders, and slaves. The garrison was the biggest concentration of Roman occupation in the north. Outside the fort itself, there is evidence of a bathhouse, an amphitheatre that could seat 2,000, and a mansio, an inn to house travellers and traders, as well as a vicus where the civilian population lived. A parade ground for cavalry display has also been identified, with evidence of shrines to Roman and local gods. The fort sits in a landscape that boasts the highest concentration of hill forts anywhere in Europe, as well as the most southerly broch in Scotland, and an abundance of native farmsteads. This area was not only strategic and taxable to the Romans, it was rich farmland to the native people. This made it a potentially rich area for trade in supplying the garrison with livestock and grain. Were relations between the local tribes, the Selgovae and the Votadini, and the Romans always friendly? Did these relationships change over time? Was there tension between local tribes, our ancestors, as they tried to come to terms with the world's first superpower? The find hints at the uneasy relationship that surely must have existed between the Roman occupants of the heavily defended fort and the native inhabitants of the surrounding lands. The Roman army's abandonment of the fort in 184 AD has given rise to much speculation. It is believed that many of the treasures found in the site's 117 huge pits and wells belong to the period the fort was the home of one of the individuals we can actually name, the centurion Lucius Maximus Gaetalicus. He left his name on an altar to the god Apollo. But what did he witness? Was the garrison forced to retreat in a hurry, under pressure from hostile native warriors, hastily throwing anything they couldn't take with them into the pits? Even human remains were put into the pits. Or was there a ritual aspect to this deposition as the Romans made a less hurried retreat southwards? Such a spectacular site has been the subject of several investigations in the 100 years since Curle first explored it. Right up to our present day, geophysical survey has added further to our knowledge of the fort and its environs. The Trimontium Trust, formed in the 1980s in response to a threat posed by the Melrose bypass, seeks to protect and promote the site. After 30 successful years in the town, the time has come to renovate and expand as we seek to engage with new audiences. With major funding from the National Lottery Heritage Fund, Scottish Government and many other bodies, and in partnership with the National Museum of Scotland, Scottish Borders Council and Live Borders, we will open in 2021 as the only museum dedicated to the Roman Iron Age in Scotland, exploring the coexistence of these two groups and their formative place in Scottish history. Run by volunteers, the new Trimontium Museum will be a vibrant, forward-looking state-of-the-art museum with an eye on the future as well as the past.
Archaeology, in spite of what some people may think, is not a subject that stands still. And you have to tell that story differently. You have to move with the changing information at our fingertips, and you have to also move in the way that we present it to the public. We have had a very successful 25 years, but things do move on, and it's time for us to move with the times.
Refurbishment will allow us to better display some of the wonderful objects from the site, and in doing so tell the story of the fort, its occupants, and the native people in whose lands it was built.
To come here years ago as a boy to Newstead and look in the field where the fort was, to be able now to sit as the chairman and help the organisation move to this next phase is a great privilege, and hopefully we can move now to that new phase of development and delivery, so that we can keep the public interested in what the Iron Age meant to Scotland, how it formed the sort of personality of who we are, and how that has formed the basis of our history through to the present day.
But it will be much more than that. As we pursue activities away from the museum as well as in it, exploring the landscape and engaging with the community. People of all ages, from school children to those now retired, will find much to explore in our new museum. We look forward to seeing you there.